Hey YouTube, welcome back to the Cutlass Board Games channel. This time again we're going to be going through some bottom of Clocktower storytelling kind of tips, but this time is the first time we're going to be looking at sects and violets. This is usually the most commonly requested script of the base 3 when it comes to players that have played a few games, and it can be really tough to run. There's a lot of information that needs to be processed in the game, and a lot of things that can happen to that information. So we're going to get started with an example setup. As you can see, this is mostly nonsense. This is just me calibrating the camera that I have set up. But we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 players, which means we will have no outsiders. I've currently got all 4 of them here. That just happen to be how things shuffled out. So we're going to have to replace them with townsfolk, but we have our 2 minions. So knowing that we're going to have a Cerenovus and we're going to have a witch means we're not going to have an evil twin. Get rid of that. And it means we're not going to have a pit hag. The pit hag gives the players a whole lot of power when it comes to characters in the game, and that can also be another balancing issue, but we will come back to that. We need to pick a demon for this setup. Let's start with that. We've got the Nodashi, the Fangu, the Vortox, and the Vigor Mortis. The Vigor Mortis one is a pretty good fit here. You won't immediately notice because of the -1 outsider. The Cerenovus and the Witch both do pretty well if they're able to continue to activate, especially the Cerenovus. Having somebody guaranteed mad on the final day, especially if they've picked really well, can be pretty strong. Fangu will mean that we can add an outsider here in one of the 4 that we have. We keep an outsider. The Vortox is obviously a favorite because of how it impacts all of the information, but it can be really hard to run if you aren't good at giving verifiably false information. As you can see, we have the Savant here already. The Savant can be complicated when it comes to giving good false information. And the other 2 we have is Oracle and Towncrier and Clockmaker. I think these are fine if it is Vortox, and then we have Nodashi. Because of the play count, I'm probably not going to go with the Nodashi. If we had outsiders, if it was maybe 11 or if it was 9, I would be more likely to. But I think Vigor Mortis is the way to go. So you'll be able to kill your minions, and they will keep their ability and poison a townsfolk neighbor. And obviously we have to be replacing outsiders. So we're just going to slot this in here. And then we need to replace our other outsiders with townsfolk to round out this setup. So we've got a couple options. And we also know that it's going to be a relatively low misinformation game. We know that the Savant is going to get potentially poisoned from the Vigor Mortis. And until we figure out what our other townsfolk are, it's going to be hard to know who or what that is going to be. Obviously you can't build where people are sitting like we are here, but it'll give you some ideas as to how it might play out. Juggler is a good one. Philosopher can be really funny if they hold it for too long. I'm probably pretty unlikely to go Snake Charmer here. I think Mathematician would be pretty strong. I think Mathematician is a good choice here. Let's find some space for the Mathematician. And maybe the Juggler. And I think the Dreamer is too powerful here. So the Dreamer is the best information character in the game. Running the Dreamer is also very hard because the 2 things that you show the person can tell a lot regardless of whether it's true or false information, because you have to show, you have to pick between townsfolk and outsider, and then you have to pick between minion and demon. And sometimes also based on where you reach into the grimoire to pull out that token can be really obvious which one of them is correct or not. So what I do is I grab the second information choice and put it in the center of the circle next to their actual character token and pull them both from the same place. And I think maybe we work in a sage here as well. So we need to replace the sweetheart. We have the mathematician. We're going to replace the klutz with the sage, and we're going to replace the mutant with the juggler. Put this aside. So now, do we think this is a balanced setup? Let's have a look. I need to adjust my town crier slightly. And the oracle. Okay, so this is an interesting setup. We've got town crier and vigor mortis. Now, this can be a little bit awkward. If the vigor mortis has killed both of the minions, the town crier will no longer receive information for the game. They would just always get a no. So that can be awkward and is worth paying attention to if they're relying a lot on what that information is going to be. That could be awkward. In this scenario, I think it is pretty likely that the minions will be the ones to be killed because you need to add the poisoning as early on as possible. So I'm thinking the flower girl might be a better choice here than the town crier. Unless if the town crier is able to piece together the fact that they're never ever going to get a ping because the minions are dead, I think the flower girl is a better choice. The flower girl on the first day can check if there is a Vortox. If every single player votes on the execution or any of the nominations, then the demon had to have voted, which means that the flower girl will get verifiably accurate information as to whether or not it is a Vortox game or one of their neighbors is the Nadashi. So with the Vigor Mortis, the flower girl is not near the minions, and so it is pretty safe from that kind of tampering and could potentially be really good information for the good team if they start narrowing down who the Vigor Mortis is. We then have the Oracle. The Oracle in the Vigor Mortis is really good because the Oracle will help you detect if a minion has been killed at night, which overlapping with what the town crier does in trying to find the minions in this particular setup. There's no point to have both. The Oracle does just fine here and will potentially alert you to the Vigor Mortis activating. In the same way that the Mathematician will, if the Vigor Mortis kills something, then the Mathematician will read that some misinformation is happening. We then also have the Juggler. And the Juggler is in a precarious position where if the Vigor Mortis kills the Serenovus, anytime after the first kill, then the Juggler becoming drunk is irrelevant. Becoming poisoned is irrelevant because they have no more information to get. And then the Savant, who is most likely to become poisoned, is really interesting because you have so many different options when it comes to giving the Savant information here. Assuming the ability is not malfunctioning, some good examples are pulling information from what other characters do, especially from Triple Brewing. Like you can do empath info, you can do chef info, you could do pseudo washwoman type stuff, which you weigh it against something else that is equally possible, but only like once it's verifiable is it helpful, right? Giving a lot of noise to the Savant can be really interesting, where it's stuff that they have to try and figure out. If you have some of the ones that I like is someone's character changed last night, so that's like indicating a Fangu jump or a Pit Hag activation or a Philosopher activation, but it's not verifiable by the town. Like you can't trust like if someone has actually said that correctly. You can do people's abilities malfunctioning, which overlaps the Mathematician a little bit, so I probably wouldn't do that here. You could do stuff like number of steps if you wanted to overlap with the Clockmaker. You could do stuff about roles in play, which could overlap with the Dreamer. You can do stuff about how the outside account could be modified, which is also really good. Like a lot of game setup information stuff is really good for the Savant on the first day, because it's pretty easy. You don't have to worry about what people are actually doing. You could do information about the demon's bluffs without it like being super obvious. I know that sounded really vague. It could be something like the demon has not publicly claimed any of their bluffs today, or something like that, which is like good false information. And then if the savant does become the one that is poisoned by either minion dying, if the savant does become poisoned, then you want to try and make the information more unhelpful. You can do stuff that's double false. You probably don't want to do stuff that's double true, but you want it to be more unhelpful. With the Vortox, it's way more obvious what you're supposed to do with the Savant template, where you just give double false information. But the Savant is like still really helpful in that case, because once they figure out it is a Vortox, then they go, okay, great, I just invert all of the information. So trying to avoid giving them coin flip information where it's like verifiably A or B states, instead having stuff that is like not mechanically viable by what the players have done beyond a claim. So you have to like actually trust and like figure out what's trusted with the different information. Some double false stuff can be telling them about the wrong witch target, telling them about saying people aren't mad, telling them about a wrong demon in play. You can always give information about what demon is in play, because that's usually what the first couple of days of SNV is like, is trying to figure out which demon they have to deal with. Then we have the juggler. The one of the Sydney meta things that happens a lot is very many people come out on the first day and juggle to help cover for the juggler so that they don't get killed and not get any information. I wouldn't be too worried about the juggler missing out on info here, and they could potentially confirm 1 or 2 townsfolk, and I don't think that's going to be too strong. I think Oracle is good, but I don't think Oracle finds the demon, right? Like, it's reactive, and can help warn the town about the witch being dead and still being active, and like limiting nominations, and potentially alert people to the fact that a Cernovus is still in play. Flower Girl is probably the most active information. In Sex and Violets, the most active info characters is Flower Girl, Dreamer, and Snake Charmer, really, because they are the best at figuring out who the demon is. I think having more than one is telling that you need the good team to have a lot of info, and then you can potentially balance that by having more misinformation with the Vortox or Nadashi. In this case, there's not that much misinformation, but there is some. We then have the Sage. The Sage is unlikely to be poisoned from the Vigor Mortis, so it will probably get correct information, and depending on how late into the game that activates, that could be pretty damning. We have the Clockmaker. That is going to get a 2, which is a little awkward, because if people clue onto the fact that the witch is an evil player, ticking around to either side is going to get an evil player killed. I think that is some of the main stuff for this setup. The Mathematician is probably just always going to get pretty correct information. I would always poison the Savant over the Mathematician, and then the Mathematician will tell people that, okay, now look, the Savant is now malfunctioning, or something like that, and it will always either get a 0 or a 1 with this setup, unless if it does in fact become poisoned. But that's kind of the main thing. If you did have any questions about this kind of stuff, or you have particular setups that you want me to have a look at, do let me know. Because I do enjoy doing this kind of thing and giving you an idea about the kind of things that you should be looking at when it comes to building a setup. I think that this one is relatively fine. It is possible that the good team has more power in their information, and you can balance that just by being less helpful to the Savant, basically, because you can't lie to the Flower Girl, but you can give the Savant misleading or unhelpful information if necessary, if the evil team's getting steamrolled. Or just giving them like unverifiable information. I think the power of this entirely lies upon how good you are at giving information to the savant. As the savant is one of the more difficult characters for the storyteller to run, I don't see it that often in S&B games. And so that means it could be a really good bluff for you to try out. Write some notes. Oh, this is what the storyteller told me. Excuse me, storyteller, I would like for you to go and look at the grimoire and then come back and talk to me. But that's S&B.